All right, well,
Oh,
I guess I'll just go ahead and start here then. Everyone ready?
yeah. That,
Um, so I figured I'd just say congratulations on a great quarter and performance on the stock price, and perhaps more importantly, the progress on Neutron and the overall business. I am curious though, when it comes to the stock price, it seems like publicly traded space companies, they seem more often targets of these meme trades and short squeezes and volatility. Is that something you ever worry about or think about much with your own company?
yeah, I mean, I'll take an answer at that and let throw it over to Adam as well. But I mean, but of course, what we're looking for is to build a good, solid, institutional base within the stock and not I don't think it's helpful to be a meme stock. And it for sure space seems to attract some of that. Some of those businesses don't have very strong fundamentals. But yeah, no, I think it's something we keep an eye on. But if you look at our shareholder makeup, it's improving over time.
Yeah, and I would say kind of a little bit of the theme of, how we're helping, democratize space. Maybe we're also helping democratize share ownership too, or opportunity for returns that maybe were a little bit more sequestered in prior cycles. So I think there's a lot of value in getting a diversified shareholder base. I think we have a very, very diversified shareholder base. But I think as Pete said, we're continuing to work on making sure that it's covering all the bases, right? We definitely want, to have more exposure to those fundamental kind of long onlys that help kind of stabilize things too in tough periods. So that have that 3 to 5 year holding period. So I think it's important to have everyone involved.
Mm. And then maybe just staying on the stock price a little bit, given the rise, has that changed your calculus at all on how you think about acquisitions or maybe using some stock going more aggressive, or is that completely irrelevant?
Yeah, I mean, look, we always keep a healthy pipeline of acquisitions, and as you know, we did that convert to put a bit of gas in the tank of for something interesting. But the fundamental driver for us to do these acquisitions, they have to be things that we really need or really believe in, or things that we think are going to significantly grow the business. So irrespective of what the stock price is doing, those things, those fundamentals have to be there. Sure, with a more valuable stock, they're less dilutive things to do, but I don't think it materially changes our calculus. We're not going to go out just because we've got a high stock price. We're not going to go out and do a whole bunch of janky deals.
Mm,
The fundamentals always have to be there for us to want to do stuff.
sure.
I can hop in with a fun question. So, Sir Peter Beck, what's it like to become a billionaire?
I mean, if my sole driver in life was to become a billionaire, I am absolutely confident there is easier ways to do it than this. So, it's. I think the thing is that's most gratifying is seeing everybody else do well as well. Shareholders that have been in for the long ride, like you guys, and so I think that brings me more joy than a number on a piece of paper, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I definitely think it's the byproduct of everybody that you're working with, and we congratulate you guys as continued success. And it's really fun. Been watching you guys just for the past 3 years since I've been a shareholder, and it'll be much more fun as we get Neutron and start to compete up with SpaceX a little bit more directly. And just huge kudos to you guys. It's so much fun, and I'm sure you guys are having a blast as well. So it's just a byproduct of all the great work that you guys are doing. So I know I asked the question in jest, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, thanks. And that's as you point out, it's a huge effort from the team and a lot of trust and faith in us from the shareholders.
Kind of in
Awesome. I
terms.
don't,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vince. Go ahead.
oh, now you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, it kind of ties to what we're talking about. Indirectly, it's kind of related to stock-based compensation. So 5 years out, when Rocket Lab is kind of like has Neutron going, is at a bit more of a mature stage. What can we expect in terms of headcount compared to the 2,000 that we have currently?
No, I'll let
Well,
Pete take a fundamental pass, then I can kind of give you my view as well.
yeah. Well, I mean, I look, we're not a company that kind of looks at a headcount metric as you know, as a real, you know, advantage or a real metric to be proud of. I mean, personally, I want the least amount of heads to execute what we want to execute on as possible. So, you know, there's definitely a, you know, a different team from developing a rocket to producing a rocket, but you know, we haven't seen huge staff growth as, you know, as we've moved, you know, Electron into, you know, into development as well. So, I mean, look, from my perspective, the least headcount possible. It's not a metric that I think we plant a flag on super, you know, and strive to employ as many people as possible. But no doubt there'll be, you know, reasonable growth as we scale that product.
And I'll just kind of add to that. I think that, you know, we still run the company on a very short leash, and I would say that there is really no place to hide here, right? So when we look at headcount, we look at adding every headcount on a kind of is this a nice to have or a must have? And then people are definitely held accountable to delivering. And you know, so it's really hard to say what the number is going to be in, you know, in 3 to 5 years. You can look at revenue metrics per head count and all that kind of stuff. But again, I think to Pete's point, that's not really all that appropriate. It's really, you know, do we have the controls in place to make sure that every headcount that is coming in and every headcount we currently have is constantly justified? Because if not, you know, we got to right the ship. So I think we're constantly looking at that almost on a, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but it's a really continuous process.
Cool. And to kind of tie that into the stock-based compensation, would we expect the stock-based compensation to increase in tandem with headcount, or is that something that's more closely tied with revenue, or maybe something else entirely different?
Yeah, it's really tied more to headcount than revenue, right? So it's really a function of purely, again, the absolute number of heads that you have. Because if you look at stock-based compensation, you know, per role, it's really pretty predictable. We have, you know, third-party compensation consultants that provide us with those, you know, compensation numbers per head need to look like, or kind of are in the ranges of like the 25th, 50th, 65th, 90th percentile. And so we can map that up pretty accurately. It's really just purely headcount driven, and it's not really tied to any other metric.
Cool. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Vince then.
All right, I want to go over to Neutron and Archimedes. I have a question that is for non-rocket engineers, because as you know, a lot of people love your company and follow it, and perhaps follow it a bit too closely. And we are not rocket engineers. And you know, I thought that when you do a hot fire test, it's like 1 month, you start it, and then the month is over, and then there's no more testing because everything is validated. And then some geniuses see that you are still testing the Archimedes engine, and then they come up with answers that this must be because the engine blew up, or, you know, you didn't do a full test. So could you explain, so non-rocket people understand like what goes on with the hot fire test? How long is it? And if you're still hot fire testing, like what are you trying to get out of it now?
Yeah, great question, Fitz. So, you know, a hot fire campaign or an engine qualification campaign runs for years, and you're always improving the engine. Right now, you know, we have Archimedes Block 1. We already have Archimedes Block 2 on the design table. And naturally, you know, as you learn as you run the engine more and more, you want to simplify the engine and you know, continue to improve it, reduce cost, reduce you know, time to build, increase reliability. And you know, an engine is just like this living, breathing, fluid thing. And you know, you're continually tweaking on it. I mean, if I think about Rutherford, you know, we've I don't know how many revisions of Rutherford we went through, probably about 3 or 4. You know, fundamentally doesn't look any different, but you know, slight tweaks to injectors to improve, you know, C-star or ISP efficiencies. You know, slight tweaks to pumps to lower the tank pressures, and you know, you're continually, you know, tweaking these things. But for Archimedes as it sits today, you know, it's in an engine qualification program. So what that means is we're looking to explore, it's called a run box, and we're looking to explore, you know, all of the idiosyncrasies of that engine, all of the operating conditions that it might see, plus margin. So, for example, you know, when we do a landing burn, you know, the tank pressures are slightly lower than when we do ascending. So we have to condition the propellant because the propellant's slightly warmer than when we took off from the ground, because it's had chance to, you know, mix with the ullage and warm up. So you have to bound all of these different operating conditions and then test the engine at all these different operating conditions, and then add margin to them as well. And then, you know, you also go through a bit of a process of just finding limits. That's why, you know, nobody should be shocked or too worried if we blow an engine up. I mean, just to be clear, we haven't. But if we blow an engine up, well, that's also normal because you know, you want to find and prove the margin that you have. You know, if you think you have, you know, 1.2 times safety factor on pump rotational speed, then you want to take it up to 1.2, obviously. But you know, is it 1.21? Is it 1.25? So some tests you deliberately, you know, might run it up to 1.4, and something might let go because you want to actually, you know, sample those margins and actually, you know, determine where they truly are versus where you predict them to be. So, you know, an engine qualification program is a very long program. You know, the first engines that go on the vehicle will be qualified for flight, but that doesn't mean that that's the end of the development program. We'll continue to refine and iterate and refine and iterate, and improve the engine over the coming years. And you'll probably visually see that as well. I think if anybody has been following, you know, the SpaceX Raptor engines, they started off you know, looking very complicated and end up looking very, very simple. And that is just the iteration cycle. Some companies just stop and don't do that. That's not us. We'll continue to improve it. But you know, an engine program is a multi-year thing. It's not a put it on, hot fire it, and call it done. Not to say though that, you know, you can't take the engine at any point of that program and go and fly it. But you know, as engineers, it's, you know, we want to really refine that to, you know, to be the most reliable, the lowest cost thing we can make.
Wow, I definitely didn't know that. So thank you for that answer. Another question that ties into Archimedes. How many engines is there capacity for you guys are to produce, and how is the scale up of the engine production coming along?
Yeah, so we're tremendously lucky to be able to acquire the Virgin Orbit facility. And in that facility, there was something like 42 CNC machines. And I think they had like 2,000 hours on the spindle, so almost no time on the spindles, and a whole bunch of, you know, factory and equipment. So it really put us, you know, on a tier for you know, bringing Archimedes into production. So you know, there's a really fast throughput of, you know, hardware rich program where you know, there's just stuff flying through the production line you know, all the time. And look, to be honest with you, I've lost track of like serial numbers because, you know, we might take, you know, serial number 3 engines pump and marry it to the latest you know, combustion chamber, and is that still serial number 3, or is that serial number 4 now? So, and it's just that you know, that mad kind of iteration cycle. But you know, suffice to say, there's like 4 bays of, you know, complete engine assembly, like 4 engine work cells, and those work cells, you know, have parts of engines or engines in them, you know, at all times, and we're just kind of cycling through as we go. But you know, we made a lot of investment earlier in the program. There was long lead time items like, you know, big 3D printers and stuff like that. And we you know, some of those things, you know, they're big capital expenditures. So, you know, we just bought one, then we proved that was going to work, and then you know, we started to buy more and more of those, you know, and so that scale up process is, you know, continues. But I would say that if I look back of where we were with Electron, for example, and where we are with Archimedes and Neutron, it's just night and day. Like we have, you know, so much more facility and factory than we ever had in the past.
Wow. So supplying the, you know, the scaling of 1 Neutron, 3 Neutron, 5 Neutron, there's like impossible that it's a bottleneck on Archimedes there.
No, I don't. Look, no, I think so. So the scaling, you know, the 135 kind of scaling is not really driven by the stuff we can make. You know, there's you know, parts from serial number 3 of Neutron's vehicle in manufacture. So it's not now. So it's not necessarily the parts that we can make in the time frame. it's just acknowledging the iteration cycle, because we'll go and fly flight 1, and then we'll learn a whole bunch of stuff. And if you couple yourself just really, really closely to just full serial production from flight 1, then you lose the ability to iterate on the vehicle and make it way, way better. And you end up, like, my biggest fear is you'd end up stuck with a really, sort of, compromised vehicle in full rate production that you just do battle with every day. So, the 135 kind of scale is as much about, facilities as it is about making sure you can take the learnings and then roll them back into the next vehicle and iterate, such that when you reach high volume manufacturing, you don't have a dog on your hands. You've got something you can produce at a reliable, steady rate.
Well, and to add to that too, I think the other thing to think about is the reusability, right? So the 135 is, yes, that's the absolute number of launches that we're targeting for 2025, 26, and 27. That's not to say that the same rocket won't fly in 2026 and then 2027, right? So the ability to kind of get to that flight cadence is really driven significantly by when we can get we can stick the landing for the first time and then have confidence that we can refly that booster, right? Because then you get into the fleet model. And that's when things get really interesting, not only from how quickly you can scale your missions, but also what that does to your margin profile, right? So that first landing of that booster is going to be a very, very momentous occasion for us because it just unlocks a whole bunch of upside.
That actually does tie into a question I was planning to ask. So I know we're kind of doing a hover landing in the ocean for the first Neutron. Have you thought about when you'll actually try to land on a barge, or is it that maybe even the second one or further down?
Yeah, it depends on the results of the first flight. If we come scorching into the Earth and pummel it into the ocean, then that's not going to give us a huge amount of confidence to put a big, expensive steel barge there. But if everything goes according to plan, then there would be no reason why we wouldn't slip a barge under the next one. So it really depends on that outcome, and then it's just kind of to more of the reason of setting expectations, correctly around a flight cadence, because those two different outcomes would could affect a flight rate. If you said you're going to come out of the chute at do 1 and then 5 and then 10, well, if you pummel one into the ocean, then you're going to spend a bit of time sorting that out. So we like to, that's why we like to be conservative on these sorts of things and give that kind of flight cadence, because it allows for these kind of things to happen and learn from.
So is it safe to say that you're sacrificing short-term scaling up of the cadence to make sure that the vehicle is right to have a much higher cadence later on in the future?
I guess you could say it like that, Vince. I wouldn't say sacrificing. I'd just say doing it properly, like actually doing it properly.
Like proper long-term thinking. I like it very much.
Maybe just a quick follow-up then, just kind of curious, any plans to, if the first one's in one piece, go fishing for it, pull it out of the water, or no need?
Oh, no. I mean, if it's sitting there floating, I'm picking it up. Jeepers. Heck yeah.
Okay. And I guess I had one other Neutron question here. So I think quite a while back, you talked about once a Neutron is assembled, it's going to stay upright. Is that kind of still the plan, or will you need transporter or erector to move things around?
No, I mean that's absolutely the plan from day one. Is I hate lifting ops, and especially those tilting ops with the big vehicle. They're a pain, and it just requires a lot of infrastructure, as you point out. I mean, the pad has no strong back, and it has no strong back because we want to land this thing vertically and should never need to break over. So. That's definitely the plan. We'll see how that works out in practice and operations. It's no biggie to break it over if we have to, but it's just extra infrastructure and extra time and extra cost that we don't want to have to put in.
So deepening on that, and once we finalize kind of the transport piece and the reusability piece, is there progress on the UTranscom point-to-point cargo delivery study that you guys have been doing, or has that really been put on pause until you get kind of the stick the landing, I guess, of course?
No, we continue to work with those guys, and we certainly continue to work with that customer.
And I guess follow up to that, what time frame, knowing that that point-to-point piece would happen, what time frame would a Rocket Lab launch of either HASTE, Electron, Neutron happen potentially outside of LC1, 2, or 3 that you guys have currently in place?
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that to really understand where that project's at with the team. But we've got a couple of different interesting offerings there, as you point out. So obviously Electron, and with VADA, we've been able to demonstrate we can stick a capsule in the Utah desert. So there's kind of a re-entry piece, and then of course Neutron provides some with the downrange landing some kind of interesting things. So there's actually quite a few things interesting things going on there to be working on.
I have one last Neutron question. I don't know if anybody else has. It's more like tempering expectations, because I suspect that soon you will have a Neutron on the pad. And then again, just to go ahead of conspiracy theories, I think that the non-rocket engineer people would think you put it on the pad and then 2 days later it will fly. And I'm guessing that there is going to be wet dress rehearsal, this test, that test. Could you temper or give us a pointer on, we will see a Neutron standing and then it will take like 3-4 months probably before it can fly, and what goes on during this time?
Yeah, I mean, so you're kind of right. So each individual stage, firstly, there's a second stage test facility actually at the launch site. So there's a whole bunch of work that we'll be doing on the second stage alone. And then, you'll just like Electron, you'll see a rocket go up and down and up and down and up and down. There's hold downs to sequence and get right. There's a whole lot of propellant commissioning to get right, and then the rocket and the launch pad is a living beast, and it has its own idiosyncrasies there, and we have no strong back, so all of the internal piping to fill stage 2 is actually inside, runs up the side inside of the vehicle. And that's just to remove a whole bunch of complexity, of course, but also to make it rapidly reusable. You literally just plug in a second stage and it just couples up with the quick connects, and away you go. So there's a few new things in there that we'll spend a bit of time on, and sometimes they're not particularly sexy with respect to the rocket. Like you're just running propellant conditioning tests and stuff like that to really understand all the thermal gradient and geysering and all this kind of stuff. So you're right. It's a long-winded way to answer your questions. You're right. Expect to see a rocket on the pad there for quite some time as we run through a barrage of tests and get to learn the system and get to learn the rocket.
Dave, you can go on to the next
sure.
topic.
I find the Mars sample return studies absolutely fascinating. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about. Well, first of all, I was very curious why Rocket Lab's proposal was added a little bit later, if there's anything you can say about that, or if it's more of a NASA question. And maybe just talk about, what it would mean to the company if you did get that beyond just obviously being a very big contract.
Yeah, so yes, no, we originally submitted a proposal and weren't selected, and I think that was the wrong decision, and then we were selected. So we were able to put together a proposal that we think is really compelling. And I think if you look at all of the key elements of that mission, we've kind of demonstrated many of them, if not most of them, in some way. For us, we look at that and we look at the $11 billion in 2040, and it's just like, man, this can be done way cheaper, way faster. And we have many of these elements. The hardest thing in that program, or one of the hardest things, everything's hard, but one of the hardest things in that program is launching from Mars, right? Nobody's launched from Mars before. But if you want to launch a little rocket off a little planet, and you picked up the phone book as an alien, who would you go and call? And I think we've proven that we can do that quite well. So So I think, that part of the mission element and architecture, I think, is a particularly strong point for us. As is, we've built a couple of Mars spacecraft before, and we've been involved in many missions in the past, one way or the other. So there's a whole lot of elements there that we feel pretty confident on, and we think, we can provide a solution to the US government and ultimately the taxpayer that provides the science outcomes for a markedly reduced price. And I think, well, personally, planetary stuff's cool, but that we don't do anything unless it makes sense, and we believe that we can make good margins from.
Yeah, so I did want to dive into that piece specifically because you did state the $11 billion. It leaves a lot of room for optimization, hopefully. So is the intent to provide the service with profit from day one, or would it be something like how we have with Electron, where you have to kind of get a cadence up before you really start to see the gap gross margins really increase to a place where it makes sense for the company to be involved in?
I'll take a shot at that one, Pete, if you
Yeah.
want. I mean, because it's a little bit more accounting. Look, I think that we're early days, super early days, but I think the way you would look at this is very likely the way that we look at our space systems satellite manufacturing programs, where you look at what's called an estimated cost to completion. The acronym is EAC, but it's estimated cost to completion. And what you do is you estimate going in how much you think the total program is going to cost to deliver. So hypothetically, let's pick a number. Let's say that you think that the program is going to cost you $7 billion, right? Actual cost to deliver. And you've got revenue of $11 billion if you kind of pitch it at the same original price. Well, as you expend the percentage of that $7 billion of cost, you recognize the pro rata amount of revenue and your forecasted program margin. And then if things change, like for example, all of a sudden now you think that, well, actually we found even better ways to do it. It's not going to cost us $7 billion, but it's a firm fixed price contract. Well, then obviously your margin on the program goes up, right? And at that point, you've actually completed a greater total cost to complete than you had originally thought. So therefore, you actually have a revenue catch up. So it's not like an Electron or a Neutron launch where you don't get to recognize revenue and margin until you hit the intentional ignition. This is when we start to get revenue and margin from the beginning as you start to deploy resources, and it would be at the overall forecasted program. So there's not like a different margin profile as you progress through the program. You kind of model the margin. As long as there's no changes to the margin forecast, then you're recognizing consistently over the program.
Wow, that's a really good answer, Adam, and I think that answers like 3 birds with 1 stone. So thank you, much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a huge disservice to not touch on space systems. So maybe Adam, this one's a little more geared towards you. In Q1 and Q2, the components side of the space systems backlog was roughly $150 million. Is this 150 million similar again as of Q3 end? Like, as far as I can tell, it's increased. I'm not sure the brevity to that increase. Is there any color you could provide for that?
I think we might be mixing apples and oranges a little bit. So we don't break out the space systems backlog by components versus services versus the systems business. What I think we said was that if you look at our components business on an annualized basis, it's currently about $150 million business, right? And so that's the 100, and then the rest of it is on the space systems, kind of systems manufacturing side of the house. So the split within the backlog between those two line items, we don't break out. And right now, of course, we have a lot of revenue. Well, so we have a lot of backlog right now that's concentrated particularly in the SDA contract that we recently won. So that's more disproportionately kind of represented now in backlog versus maybe other parts of that total business.
Cool. And as these mega constellation reaction wheels are starting to ship, are you guys still on track for that 2,000 this year? And similarly, like, is this a one-time event in 2024, or should we extrapolate this into 2025, maybe 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on track for those reaction wheels. The team is going strongly, and this isn't a one-time thing. This is a constant supply over many years of those systems.
Cool. And just a quick follow-up to that, with the magnitude of this order, like for the Electron, by example, when there's a bulk order, sometimes we see a bit of a discount given. Is that similar, given that you had to build an entire line for these folks, or is that kind of like what you see is what you get in terms of price? Is there anything you can mention for that? I know it's confidential, so I don't want to step on toes here, but
Yeah. I mean, so it's very typical for not getting into specifics, but it's very typical for large constellation players to have price targets, and they'll put out RFPs with price targets, and it's up to the supply the end supplier base to look at those cost targets and determine whether or not they can meet them, and they can make good margins against meeting those price targets. And I would say that this is consistent with that. So we took a look at what the price target was, and we think, well, can we do it for that and still make good margin? And if so, we'll go and pursue those opportunities. And if we think it's just dirt margin business, and then we're very selective on what we do and what we don't do.
Yeah, and I think if you think about what this has really enabled for us, is actually it's pretty powerful, because if we were selling a customer 12 reaction wheels a year with the same requirements or same specifications, they're certainly priced much, much higher. But it also costs us a lot more to make those. So if you look at the absolute, like the gross margin profile on the 12 order sale versus the much larger mega constellation sale, they're actually not that disparate. So the absolute dollars really are driven by the price times quantity. The margin dollars are again relatively consistent as a percentage. But what this really enables is us now, when you have another customer that comes along and wants to order 12 reaction wheels off the same production line as we're producing for the mega constellation, the margins just go through the roof, right? Because we don't give that same pricing, obviously, to the 12 unit order as to the 2,000 unit order. So it's really, really helpful, and it's kind of brought us along to kind of expand the margins on that particular product line.
I just want to say, I don't remember if Muriel said how much time we have with you guys, and we don't want to hold you up. If Scott, you can cut this out later in the interview.
I have no idea. I'll just keep talking until somebody tells me I've got to leave.
Someone knocks on the door. Yeah.
Then we keep you guys here until we can.
Muriel's giving me the thumbs up and waving her hand, so I think we're all good. You keep going.
Okay, good. I say hi to her. I just want to go back to the Mars sample return mission. Could you guys elaborate on, if you guys get the contract, hopefully you do, is it like time-wise? Because I think some people are thinking like you get it and then it's delivered next year, but I guess you need to do a lot of planning, and then is it like 3 years coming up with new spacecraft, or do you maybe already have all the components you just need to marry together, and what would be the timeline of that mission?
So I think it's important to put this mission into context. I mean, this is kind of an Apollo-esque level of difficulty, right? This is not a slap some spacecraft together and go. I mean, you have to launch multiple spacecraft, transit them, across our solar system to Mars. One stays in orbit, one comes down, lands, and then collects the samples, then ingests them into another rocket, then launches and goes into Mars orbit, then rendezvous with another spacecraft that's already in Mars orbit, then transits back to Earth. All the time the samples are being sterilized, then re-enters Earth's gravity well and back into Earth orbit, then deorbits Earth and then lands in the desert. So there's multiple craft, multiple complexities here. It is really, really hard. Now, the good news is that we like really, really hard stuff, and we're good at that. But yes, there is a number of years of R&D and development of the various systems, and then you've got to time your Mars windows, so you can't just go willy-nilly anyway. There's Mars windows drive a lot of the timing. And then when you're back at Mars, you've got to time an Earth window. So no, there's a lot going on. But in saying that, $11 billion in 2040 is insane. That's just way too much and way too long. And I think getting them back at least with a 2030 number in there, whether it's 35 or whatever, is totally doable. But also could add some temper to that program is it hasn't been decided that commercial, NASA hasn't decided that they're going to go commercial. And we've proposed a solution that's soup to nuts. Rocket Lab logo on the side of everything. Now, NASA may choose to select elements of our proposal. They might go, well, SpaceX has a really great cruise stage, whatever. Rocket Lab has a really great ascent stage, and it'll be interesting to see how they go about, going about stitching the program together. Of course, our view is that vertical integration is the way to go. Stick it all under one roof, but we'll, I think there's a lot of water to flow under the bridge yet.
All right, thank you for that.
I have a quick one. This one might be for Adam. So you talked about complex systems. So obviously we've been pretty simple as the company's kind of grown. Well, simple in my view, but it's really just been Electron and space systems that have really dominated the revenue stream. So it's really easy to look at it from a split in the two segments. But as we progress to providing space systems like constellations and things like, is there going to be more granularity, whether it's on the investor presentations or the 10Ks that has launch separated into, say, the three segments, Neutron, HASTE, Electron, space systems separated to whole satellites, components, transport vehicles, and then space systems for SOC, and then constellation and landing operations? Or is it just going to kind of stay very high level like you have it now in the launch and space systems split?
Yeah, well, even as we are right now, it's probably more granular than companies like to report. I mean, executives like to keep it as macro as possible, right? Because the simpler, the better. Now, what we've done, doing the segment reporting at the level we think is the appropriate place to be. We have launch and we have space systems. I really don't see us breaking it down further below that. I think that, but the good thing about our business is, when we launch an Electron, you'll know when we launch a Neutron. I think within the space systems business, I think it probably will be to our advantage to continue, even if we may not in the segment reporting break it down with any more granularity. We'll certainly speak with a lot of granularity, because each business kind of has its own. It's got some commonalities, but also has some individual merits. Like, for example, ultimately on the constellation side, the big, everything, what you shoot for there on a business model perspective is that recurring revenue. And once you get your capital to be deployed, then you go on the CapEx holiday, as they like to call it in the constellation world. And that's when you can generate some really, really high, EBITDA margins, right? So I think that, it would not be in our interest to not provide that clarity when those kind of developments start to occur in the business. And I think you've also seen, from an overall transparency, if you look at our investor decks and so forth, I think we provide a lot. In fact, I've gotten some feedback that maybe you guys provide a little bit too much, right? Like your calls are getting really long, which is great, because that means people are really interested, and they really appreciate all the color that Pete provides, particularly on the engineering side of what's going on in the business. But at some point, we probably have to think about kind of curtailing that a little bit, as much as people seem to enjoy it. We have now got the distinction, I think, of having one of the longest calls now on our quarterly calls.
Yeah. Well, can we kick those guys out? I love listening to you guys. It's like a college course. I've actually because Adam, when we first brought on the company, I was like, why are we buying these space systems? I thought this was a launch company. And so your investor day presentations and everything have really brought me along. And those conference, anyway, I'll leave it.
We'll continue to do that. I mean, that's in our nature, right? I think, Pete's excited. I'm excited about the business. And so something you're excited about, you talk about. So I think you can look forward to that.
Yeah, I also just want to say that, yes, the conference calls are very long, but I think it's because there are a lot of analysts asking a lot of questions. I think Pete's presentation and your presentation of the finances is just the right amount. So make sure you don't take that away.
We appreciate that feedback.
Well, you guys should see it before we have like the giant slide cull a couple of days before the call, because there's honestly, there's so much that's going on. We have to kind of, wow, we really like to talk about that, but we won't talk about that. And so, we could go much longer. I can guarantee you.
Good problem to have, I'm sure, having to call the slides.
Yeah. For me, what makes it long is like sometimes you have analysts who's like, are you going to launch Neutron from New Zealand? And it's been covered like 15 times. I could answer that question, and then it adds okay. Moving on.
Yeah, I figured I'd just ask a quick one. I know you've kind of talked about the recent election in the States a little bit before. Sounds like pretty much everything's on the table right now. There's rumors about SLS and all sorts of things. Is there anything in particular you'd kind of like to see new administration focus on more, or any opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've, I've talked about this in other places. I think this administration is net good for space. I mean, clearly there is a much stronger focus on the space, and there's a much stronger focus on doing it really efficiently. So if you're a traditional cost plus contractor, I think this world is going to be uncomfortable. But for us, take the Mars sample return as a classic example. Those kind of programs are going to be promoted in this administration. So, I'm pretty bullish on the next term here. I think some good progress can be made.
And I think there's also been some narrative around, reducing some of the regulatory kind of complexity and so forth. And I think, we'll benefit from that because we run fast. So anything that allows us to keep running faster is good for us. And like you said, probably not good for other people. They can't take as much advantage of that as we can, but we certainly will take all the advantage out of that as possible.
I have a question that ties into this a little bit. Adam, you mentioned on a lot of conferences that what's interesting with Rocket Lab is like people expect a hockey stick like from the commercial, and then you see the commercial developing really, really well, but Rocket Lab also has a hockey stick potential like from government. And I'm curious, like when you say that, do you mean like the Neutron launches from the government, or do you mean there is a hockey stick in the space systems and government orders, or is it both?
It's really both. I mean, the reference to that really is the fact that you've got things like, the SDA program, for example, right? I think that's a hockey stick that was really, it's a hockey stick for us. It's a hockey stick that's available to some of the players that weren't traditional primes, right? In the sense as Pete was talking about these cost plus kind of players. So for us, you've got all of this activity taking place in places like SDA. And of course, for us, we now have the HASTE opportunities, which are growing very nicely for us. So, and then things that we do, for example, in building things like the SDA satellites for Tranche 2, well, perhaps those and maybe other future tranches will also feed, Neutron launch cadence as well. And so maybe some R&D opportunities on Electron. So I think overall, it's really kind of a broad-based, kind of hockey stick that's touching pretty much every part of our business.
All right, thank you.
Growing up in Canada, I love hockey sticks. I like this one even more.
So this is probably for both of you. If neutron demand doesn't worry you guys, what does keep you up at night? Safety, constellations, or do you guys both sleep pretty good?
Oh, have you seen the look of me sometimes? I don't sleep well at all. No,
well, we were talking about that before you got on, about all the flights you're taking.
No, look, I think to be successful in this business, you need a high degree of paranoia about everything. I think if you go to bed and just sleep soundly every night, then you don't understand what's going on. I wish. I mean, that just sounds like an absolute dream to be able to go home, turn off, and just put everything behind you. That sounds like something to really strive for. But no, I think for me personally, a high degree of paranoia about everything. I'm tossing and turning all night, every night. And I think that's just what it takes to be successful in this industry.
Yeah, I agree with Pete. I think what keeps me up at night, Pete's got a lot more technical things to keep him up at night. For me, I think there's a great importance on making sure that we maintain our culture as we grow. So when I joined the company, I think I was employee number 100. We now have over 2,100 employees, scattered across 5 U.S. states, 3 countries. The first question coming in was talking about headcount. Clearly, that headcount will continue to grow. One of the things that attracted me to make the switch to come to Rocket Lab and join an entirely new startup, an entirely new risky industry, was the fact that, when I made my first trip over to New Zealand and Pete walked me around the factory, and then we went out to Mahia to see the launch pad, I was like, I couldn't believe the capital efficiency. It was staggering to see how much had been done for such a small amount of money compared to what it usually takes in this industry. And we have to continue to be able to do that. And in order to do that, it's all about the people, right? And I think we've been super fortunate that we've got an incredibly talented, large-scale team now. But as that team continues to, needs to continue to grow, how do we make sure that we keep that kind of sieve or how we kind of sort through all the people to make sure we're continuing to keep that type of culture. And because what we're trying to do here is so incredibly difficult, and and it doesn't take much to infect a culture. And so I know that, Pete and I, and particularly Pete, spends a tremendous amount of time inserting, ourselves in various parts of the business to make sure that culture is still well intact. And I think part of it is you create that you create a certain amount of paranoia, not just at our level, but at every level, right? And so, we had an all hands meeting last week where I reiterated the fact that, look, I want, the last dollar, that we raised was hopefully in the last round, right? I never want to raise more money. Now, we might do it for very good reasons, right? To accelerate growth and do all kinds of stuff, but we have to treat every dollar that we have like it's the last. And I think that's been the way Pete kind of started the company. It's still very much the ethos, but we can never lose that. And we just got to keep people realizing that this is not a 9 to 5 place. This is a place where people come to do amazingly difficult things, and you sleep well at night when you're comfortable. You've accomplished great things. I think that's probably the thing that makes me, kind of gives me the most pause, because it's just so hard to make sure you keep that kind of in focus.
I agree with Adam, and even today, every employee that comes through this place, I induct and spend an hour with in a big group, of course, but spend an hour with every new employee that comes within this company, and and it's just super clear expectations laid down from day one about what it means to work here and what it means for us to be successful. So there's no fuzz on expectations. And I think that's what it takes, is just it's spending time with every person, and also making sure all the managers are clear on the vision, and make sure that they are the proliferators of the Rocket Lab magic.
Love to hear it, for sure, as an investor.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've taken up a lot of your time, so I don't want to hold you any longer unless there's any final questions from you guys.
I have a quick one, if you don't mind. Any
Okay.
plans for Electron reused this year? Like
I
sorry,
don't know what you're saying. Yeah, no, you mean
Electron recovery. I mean, my apologies.
Yeah, no, look, there's one sitting there on the production line, but right now, as we said, the team needs to be focused on Neutron. It'd be a nice kind of thing to claim, but at the end of the day, the biggest impact for Electron is just cadence, and the biggest impact for the company is having a recovery engineer work on Neutron. As I look back on that program, the most valuable thing that has given us by far has been the ability to test new materials and learn, run trajectories, and understand fully how to re-enter a launch vehicle. The kind of benefit from here on in is there's definitely something there, but it's not when you weigh it against Neutron, it's just all hands to the pump on Neutron.
Cool.
All right. Thank you guys very, very much. Congratulations on the fantastic quarter and everything moving well. Hopefully see you guys again next quarter.
Thank you guys
Love
for taking
to.
the time.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cheers. Hey,
Yeah.
and Vince, congratulations on the newborn.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Did you see he had the Rocket Lab onesie on
I did
Twitter?
not. Yep. No, I have to have a look.
Yeah, no problem. So he's already a Rocket Lab shareholder. Very proud of him.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, you got to be careful. Don't take it too far, because I got an email last week from a shareholder with the picture was basically his arm with Electron tattooed on his arm, and he was saying, "Can I get some free swag?" So,
And we should totally send him some free swag for that. Come on.
absolutely, 100%. We'll get him loaded up. Yeah.
Get him one of these T-shirts.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know if you guys know, but we made a bet when Rocket Lab was like $3 or $4. I have to go back and watch on Rocket Lab Weekly that if the stock goes 100x from that point, then we will have a Peter Beck tattoo somewhere on our body. I just and we're
You and me
moving.
both.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving dangerously close into that direction, which is very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right.
If
Thanks,
you do,
guys.
I hope you get one that with me in a better physical condition than not.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you guys so
All
much
right.
for the extra
Thanks,
time.
guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye bye.